The Arnold Classic 1997 is still remembered today as one of the most iconic contests in bodybuilding history. It wasn't just another edition of the show, it was a real snapshot of a sport changing right in front of the audience's eyes. Anyone watching that night could feel that something different was happening on stage. By the late 1990s, bodybuilding was clearly going through a transition. On one side, there was still a strong appreciation for classic aesthetics, clean lines, symmetry, and proportion. On the other, a new era was starting to take over, defined by physiques that were bigger, denser, and far more extreme. The Arnold Classic 1997 landed right at that turning point. The stage brought together some of the most influential names of the decade, athletes who were already legends and others who were still in the process of building their legacy. Many of them were at critical moments in their careers, either trying to prove something to the judges or fighting for recognition in an increasingly competitive scene. That alone pushed the level of the competition to another level. The overall vibe of the show reflected that tension between two very different visions of bodybuilding. Every pose comparison seemed to ask the same silent question: what really mattered at that moment? The harmony of the physique or the raw, jaw-dropping impact of sheer size? That's exactly why the 1997 edition was never forgotten. More than just crowning a champion, the event became a symbol of change, a milestone that helps explain how bodybuilding closed one chapter and opened the door to another. And when people talk about the Arnold Classic 1997, it's impossible not to start with the winner of the night, Flex Wheeler. That year, he claimed his second Arnold Classic title with a performance that many fans and experts still consider one of the most aesthetic displays in bodybuilding history. It wasn't just about winning. It was about leaving a visual imprint that people would never forget. Flex's physique stood out immediately. His near-perfect symmetry created a rare sense of balance on stage, while his round, full muscle bellies gave his body a smooth, flowing look. His extremely tight waist only amplified the famous V-taper, something that was already becoming less common during that era. Beyond his natural structure, Flex Wheeler's stage presence made all the difference. Every pose was hit with control, confidence, and precision, highlighting his strengths and creating instant visual impact. It wasn't just muscle, it was aesthetics in motion, keeping the audience locked in from start to finish. What made it even more impressive was the level of competition. Flex was standing next to opponents who were clearly bigger and heavier. At a time when size was starting to dominate the sport, he proved that bigger wasn't always better. Overall balance, proportion, and visual flow mattered more in the judges' eyes. Beyond Flex's victory, his showdown with Nasser El Sonbati at the Arnold Classic 1997 became one of the most talked-about battles in bodybuilding history. It wasn't just a fight for a trophy. It was a direct clash between two completely different philosophies of the sport. The physical difference between the two was impossible to miss. Nasser stepped on stage weighing roughly 20 kilograms more, which is about 44 pounds, than Flex Wheeler. Visually, it felt like two totally different interpretations of bodybuilding standing side by side. Despite that massive size advantage, the win still went to Flex. The judges chose to reward symmetry, proportion, and fluidity over the pure shock factor of extreme mass. That decision marked one of the last major victories of the classic V-taper in a sport that was rapidly moving toward the era of the so-called mass monsters. For many fans, that result represented the final stand of high-level classic aesthetics. For others, it was a controversial call that exposed just how divided bodybuilding had become at that moment. And that's exactly why this matchup never faded away. Even today, detailed comparisons between Flex Wheeler and Nasser El Sonbati keep popping up, reigniting heated debates among fans all over again. Behind the scenes, one specific moment helped turn that victory into something even more legendary. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the creator of the event and the biggest icon in bodybuilding history, reportedly walked up to Flex Wheeler personally right after the final results. What looked like a quick exchange ended up becoming one of the most famous quotes the sport has ever seen. According to those who were there, Arnold looked at Flex and said something that would echo for decades: "You're the best bodybuilder I've ever seen." Coming from someone who set the standards, shaped entire eras, and watched generations of champions up close, that statement carried massive weight. It wasn't just a compliment. It was almost a stamp of aesthetic perfection. Arnold went even further with a comparison that became iconic. He described Flex's physique as a Ferrari parked next to war tanks, a direct reference to the extremely massive athletes sharing the stage at the time. The message was crystal clear. While many impressed with raw size, Flex stood out for elegance, flow, and visual precision. That comment didn't just elevate Wheeler's win, it also helped explain the judge's decision. The Arnold Classic 1997 wasn't won by the guy with the most muscle, but by the athlete who represented a nearly artistic ideal of bodybuilding, something Arnold himself had always valued since his own competitive days. As the years went by, that praise became inseparable from Flex Wheeler's legacy. Still at the same event, Ronnie Coleman finished the competition in a position that sounds almost unbelievable today: 4th place. At that point, he was seen as incredibly strong, thick, and full of potential, but nowhere near being viewed as the future ruler of the sport. To many fans, Ronnie was just another powerful name among the giants of the 1990s. What's interesting is that, in hindsight, almost no one could have predicted what was coming next. Ronnie wasn't treated as a clear favorite or as someone destined for all-time greatness. His physique stood out for strength and muscle density, but something was still missing that clearly separated him from the rest in the judges' eyes. Some technical details played a role that year. Judges and observers noticed that Ronnie wasn't properly flexing his chest during several mandatory poses. That small presentation flaw ended up hiding part of his true potential, making it harder for his physique to be fully appreciated on stage. It's a perfect example of how, in bodybuilding, having massive muscles isn't enough. Posing, body control, and the ability to showcase every detail are crucial, especially at an event as high-level as the Arnold Classic. In 1997, Ronnie was still learning that lesson. What makes it all even more impressive is what happened next. Just 1 year later, in 1998, Ronnie Coleman would begin his historic reign of 8 consecutive Mr. Olympia titles. The top 10 of the Arnold Classic 1997 helps explain why this edition is still so memorable. It wasn't just about rankings. It was a true gathering of athletes who defined different generations of bodybuilding. Every name on that list represents a style, a phase of the sport, and a unique story on the professional stage. At the top, Flex Wheeler confirmed his aesthetic dominance, closely followed by Nasser El Sanbadi, the ultimate symbol of extreme mass at the time. Right behind them, Michael Francois showed up as one of the densest and most respected physiques in the lineup, delivering consistency and serious visual power. 4th place went to Ronnie Coleman, still far from his peak, but already showing clear signs that something big was being built. In 5th, Vince Taylor brought the experience and maturity of a seasoned veteran, staying competitive in the middle of a new, hungry generation. After that, Paul Dillett stunned everyone with his sheer size and visual impact, while Lee Priest, making his Arnold Classic debut, shocked the audience by taking 7th place at just 24 years old. Even at a shorter height, his muscle volume and charisma grabbed the attention of both fans and the bodybuilding media. Rounding out the top 10 were Kevin Levrone, known for his explosive muscle bellies, Aaron Baker, and Al Gurley, completing an incredibly stacked and competitive lineup. Among so many established names at the Arnold Classic 1997, one particular highlight grabbed the crowd's attention right away. Lee Priest made his debut at the event at just 24 years old, finishing in an impressive 7th place. For an athlete that young, simply stepping onto that stage was already a huge achievement. Walking away with that placing was a true statement to the bodybuilding world. What surprised people the most was the contrast between his shorter height and the sheer mass of his physique. Lee Priest showed an unusual level of muscle density for someone his size, which immediately sparked curiosity and admiration from fans and judges alike. Lee's debut also helped underline how bodybuilding was becoming more diverse. It was no longer just a battle of who could be the biggest overall, but a clash of different body types, structures, and styles of muscular development. Alongside the young Australian, the event featured extremely experienced competitors who pushed the technical level even higher. Vince Taylor brought his maturity and consistency, while Paul Dillett stunned the audience with his massive size and raw visual impact on stage. Closing out this group of standouts, Kevin Levrone reinforced the elite standard of the show with his explosive physique and commanding stage presence. Beyond the athletic prestige, the event was also remembered for a prize package that perfectly captured the peak of bodybuilding's so-called golden era. Unlike today's standards, winning that contest meant far more than just standing on the top spot. It was a reward that matched the growing global importance of the event. The overall winner took home a $100,000 check, an extremely significant amount for the time. But the money wasn't the whole story. The champion also received a Hummer, a vehicle that, in the 1990s, was the ultimate symbol of status, power, and success. That detail helped create an almost mythical image of the winner, someone who didn't just win competitions, but embodied dominance, impact, and public recognition. To top it all off, the prize package also included a luxury Audemars Piguet watch, reinforcing the sense of exclusivity and refinement. It was an interesting contrast. On one side, muscle, power, and intensity. On the other, elegance, precision, and luxury. That mix of rewards perfectly shows how the Arnold Classic 1997 captured the spirit of the 1990s. The event didn't just reward the winning physique, it celebrated the athlete as a complete icon. While the main spotlight of the Arnold Classic 1997 was on the men's division, the event also shined in other important categories. In the Ms. International, the overall winner was Yolanda Hughes-Hang. Her victory highlighted the high technical standard of women's bodybuilding at the time, defined by sharp conditioning, strong presentation, and a stage presence that was just as impressive as the men's. In the Fitness International, the title went to Carol Simple-Marzetta. This division was rapidly gaining momentum in the 1990s, blending physique, athletic performance, and charisma, helping draw an even broader audience to the event. These parallel competitions reinforced the idea that the Arnold Classic 1997 wasn't just a historic night for one athlete. It was a stage where different expressions of the sport coexisted, each one contributing to the strong and diverse identity of the contest. The event went down in history as far more than just another edition of a show. It became a true turning point, symbolizing the direct clash between classic aesthetics and the unstoppable rise of extreme mass in professional bodybuilding. It was one of the last major stages where physical harmony managed to defeat sheer size at the highest competitive level. For many fans, Flex Wheeler's victory felt like a farewell to an era where proportion, lines, and symmetry were still the ultimate standard of excellence. At the same time, the event also hinted at the future of the sport. Ronnie Coleman's presence, still outside the top spot, served as a quiet warning of what was coming next. Not long after, bodybuilding would fully enter the era of gigantic, ultra-dense, almost superhuman physiques. That blend of past and future is what makes the Arnold Classic 1997 so special. It connects two generations, two styles, and two completely different visions of what the perfect bodybuilding physique should be. That's why, to this day, this edition is remembered as one of the most symbolic, debated, and analyzed contests in the history of the sport. And now comes the final question. If you had to choose, which side would you defend? The classic aesthetic or the absolute dominance of mass?